when I'll buy silver again isn't a question of belief. It's a question of conditions. I've been clear that silver still plays a critical long-term role in a world shaped by rising debt, structural deficits, and declining confidence in fiat currencies. That hasn't changed. What has changed is the environment around price, policy, and positioning. I don't buy assets simply because they have a strong narrative. I buy them when the odds are tilted in my favor. Right now, silver is respected, discussed, and widely defended. That tells me the market is aware of the risks. But awareness alone doesn't create opportunity. For me to buy silver again, something needs to shift. Either price needs to reset, or the macro backdrop needs to deteriorate in a way that materially improves silver's risk-reward profile. Historically, the best silver entries didn't come when sentiment was confident. They came when patience was tested. I'm watching for signs that real interest rates are decisively turning lower, not just expected to. I'm watching for liquidity conditions to loosen in a measurable way, not just in speeches or forecasts. And I'm watching for price behavior that reflects exhaustion rather than enthusiasm. Silver has a habit of correcting sharply even within long-term uptrends, often pulling back 15 to 25% before the next sustainable move higher. Those moments feel uncomfortable, but they're where disciplined buying happens. Another trigger would be confirmation that inflation is reaccelerating, while policy remains constrained, pushing real yields back toward zero or negative territory, an environment where silver historically performs best. Until one of those changes occurs, buying more would be about emotion, not structure. Holding keeps exposure intact. Waiting preserves capital and clarity. Knowing when not to act is just as important as knowing when to move. And this is the part of investing most people skip. I'm not waiting for perfection. I'm waiting for alignment. When price, policy, and probability start pointing in the same direction again, that's when silver moves from something I respect back into something I actively buy. One of the most important changes I'm waiting for before buying silver again is a clear shift in interest rates and real yields, not just expectations built into headlines. Right now, monetary policy remains restrictive by historical standards. Even if markets talk about future easing, what matters is where real rates actually settle, not where investors hope they will go. Silver tends to thrive when holding cash becomes unattractive, when inflation meaningfully outpaces yields and capital is forced to look for protection rather than income. For me to step back in aggressively, I want to see real yields compress towards zero or move decisively negative, signaling that the cost of holding non-yielding assets like silver has disappeared. This doesn't happen quietly. It usually coincides with policy stress, economic slowdown, or renewed inflation pressure that policymakers can't easily control. Another factor is liquidity. Silver rallies that last are rarely built during tight liquidity conditions. They emerge when financial systems are flooded with excess capital searching for hedges. I'm watching credit markets, funding conditions, and central bank balance sheets closely. When liquidity expands, silver doesn't need a perfect story. It needs room to breathe. At the same time, I'm cautious about buying into silver purely on rate cut speculation. Markets often price these scenarios months in advance, and when cuts finally arrive, prices can stall or reverse if the move was already anticipated. That's why confirmation matters. I want to see markets reacting to real policy shifts, not narratives. There's also the question of the US dollar. Sustained silver upside typically aligns with a weakening dollar environment, not brief pullbacks. If the dollar begins a broader downtrend due to fiscal stress, trade imbalances, or policy credibility issues, that would significantly improve silver's setup. Until then, I'm treating silver with respect, not urgency. When rates, liquidity, and currency trends align, silver doesn't need convincing. It moves on its own. That's the environment I'm waiting for. Because buying into strength, without macro support turns long-term investing into short-term guessing. Price behavior itself will also play a major role in determining when I buy silver again. Markets communicate through price long before headlines catch up, and silver is especially honest in that regard. I'm not interested in adding during periods where price is grinding higher on optimism alone. I'm interested in moments where price forces weak hands out and resets expectations. Historically, silver has produced some of its best long-term entry points after sharp fast corrections, moves that feel disproportionate to the news at the time. Pullbacks in the range of 15 to 30% have been common even during strong, secular bull phases. And those declines often occur when sentiment flips from confidence to frustration. That's not a sign of failure. It's a sign of cleansing. I'm watching for price to either consolidate for an extended period, months, not weeks, or to experience a volatility-driven reset that compresses speculative positioning. When momentum traders leave and volume dries up, silver becomes interesting again. Another key signal is how silver behaves relative to gold. When silver begins to underperform gold significantly, it often signals risk aversion and caution. But when that underperformance stabilizes and reverses, it tends to mark the start of a healthier silver move. I'm also paying attention to how silver reacts to bad news. If negative macro data, stronger than expected economic numbers, or temporary dollar strength fail to push silver meaningfully lower, that tells me downside pressure is being absorbed. Strong markets stop falling on bad news before they start rising on good news. That's not something you predict. It's something you observe. Right now, silver hasn't fully gone through that process. It's been resilient, but resilience alone isn't enough to justify new buying. I want to see evidence that selling pressure has been exhausted and that price is being supported by long-term buyers rather than short-term momentum. When silver stops rewarding impatience and starts rewarding discipline, that's when the risk-reward balance shifts again. That's the point where adding stops feeling urgent and starts feeling logical. Another change I'm watching closely before buying silver, again, is positioning and sentiment. Because markets don't move on logic alone, they move on imbalance. Silver doesn't peak when fundamentals weaken. It peaks when too many investors are already positioned for the same outcome. Right now, sentiment around silver is constructive but not exhausted, which tells me the market hasn't fully reset yet. I want to see that optimism cool. I'm tracking speculative futures positioning, ETF inflows, and the tone of financial commentary. When silver becomes frustrating to hold, when prices drift sideways for months or grind lower, despite strong long-term arguments, that's usually when opportunity quietly forms. Another signal is volatility. Sustainable silver advances tend to start after volatility spikes, not during calm advances. Sudden sharp moves shake out leverage, force weak hands to exit, and transfer supply to more patient holders. I'm also paying attention to how silver behaves relative to other assets. If equities struggle, liquidity tightens, and silver still holds key support levels, that tells me long-term buyers are stepping in. But if silver continues to attract steady inflows without any meaningful pullback, risk remains skewed toward disappointment. I don't need panic to return. I need indifference. When silver stops being discussed daily, when headlines lose interest, and when investors begin reallocating elsewhere out of boredom rather than fear, that's when the setup improves. Until positioning resets and sentiment becomes neutral again, buying more silver would be premature. Holding preserves exposure while patience restores optionality. Markets reward those who wait for imbalance, not those who chase consensus. So when I say that I'll buy silver again, I'm not talking about just a feeling. I'm talking about a robust framework. I'm eagerly waiting for a moment when the key aspects, price, policy, and positioning, all align in a manner that shifts the probability of the buying side back in favor of the buyer. This can manifest itself as a meaningful price reset, where silver corrects adequately enough to rebuild a margin of protection. It could also take the form of a macro shift, where real interest rates decrease, firmly, and liquidity expands as a direct result of the growing economic stress in the system. Alternatively, it could occur through time, where a prolonged consolidation period drains the existing enthusiasm and restores expectations without the creation of major headlines. Any one of these changes would alter the risk-reward scenario for silver investment. There is no doubt that until then, holding onto a disciplined position remains the superior choice. Silver, as an asset, has already started its role as a crucial hedge against long-term monetary uncertainty and systemic imbalances. My role isn't to force any action, making the position function, as there are too many investors who confuse activity with progress. However, in the complex world of markets, restraint is often the edge that distinguishes success from regret. When the next genuine buying opportunity presents itself, It won't appear as if it's obvious or easy to embrace. It will rather feel quiet, uncertain, and a great deal harder to ignore. This is usually how the most successful entries make their appearance. When that moment finally arrives, I will act with confidence. However, until then, patience safeguards both the capital invested and the clarity that one seeks. Silver isn't something that I attempt to chase. It's something that I'm genuinely prepared to accumulate when the critical juncture arrives, once the conditions really transform.